will defer item number 3, which is a resolution, to November 2nd, 2021, as staff has requested. Are there any questions for the consent agenda 1 through 4? Director Wright? Director Wright, if you could please speak in the mic just a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My question is this a part of the original $3 million that we set aside for the Arkansas Livestock Show Association? Is this a part of the original $3 million?
That's my understanding. Mr.
It is. Yes, ma'am.
How much is there remaining to be allocated?
I will get that. It's not a lot. I mean, we've, over the 10-year period, they incrementally have come forward to, put in new lighting and things like that. This is to buy some much needed property. But I will get you that how much money is left in that.
Because I thought we had already given them the full allocation.
We have not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Wright. Any questions for items 5 and 6 or 5? Director Wright?
I'd like a presentation on number 7 regarding the land bank. Is that 7? Let me pull these off. I can't read with them up on me. Oh, I'm sorry. I bypassed it. It was number 2, I think. But if we passed it, that's fine. I just saw Miss Dean, Ruby Dean here, and I wanted to get an update on what we were doing with the land bank.
Ms. Dean? Mrs. Dean?
That'll probably answer all my questions.
Yes, ma'am. If you'll update us on item number 2.
Good evening, Mayor Scott, Board of Directors. On item number 2, this property is located 3517 West 11th Street. It's for sale, it's near some properties that we had already sold in the land bank, and the land bank would like to purchase this property.
Okay, what about 1? That's the one I was meant to get. This is something y'all are gonna purchase from the State Land Commission?
From the auction, yes, ma'am. We 6 parcels that we bidded on at the State Land Commissioner's auction, and we would like permission to accept title to those properties.
Is that normal that we buy?
What was your question?
Is it normal that we buy land from the State Land Commission?
We have in the past. I've looked at records from previous administration. That's one way of getting properties back into the land bank inventory. As you can see now, when I started, we had 101 parcels, and we're down to 34.
I told
We're
them
trying to replenish our inventory.
I told them when they hired you, you do a good job. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, Mayor, just one other question. Another reason we do that is to help spearhead neighborhood revitalization or any kind of revitalization plans that we're doing in certain parts of our community where we have a disparate number of marginalized children, youth, and families. So it's part of how we have built up infrastructure in underserved parts of our city. Is that correct?
That's correct. And most of the parcels that we purchase are in 7. And the purpose of those is to revitalize the neighborhood and to reduce the blight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby.
Okay.
Director Adcock?
Item 6.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I did try to reach out to Mr. Derek Rainey this week. I think I left 5 messages. He never did return my phone calls. I did receive a phone call from a gentleman in Sarah's office who said that he was Mr. Rainey's supervisor. In talking to him, I worked on Land Bank, I worked on Animal Village, I worked on rental inspection and seniors. Those are lots of groups that we've had in the past. I think what concerned me was a road council, because we've always in the past brought together a group of residents and worked with them for several months on forming like the land bank, animal village and everything, but we never called it a council. So I think that was one of the things I was concerned about, was why now are we calling this a council? In the past, they was just working groups. So, but after talking to the man from Sarah's office, they are just going to talk to small business people. I had some questions about some things I would like to see in that, such as that they all are in good standing with the state of Arkansas and with the city of Little Rock. And also that we make sure that we have businesses, if there's going to be business or is it going to be nonprofits? Because I think that each one of those has different needs in our community. Thank you.
And Mayor, on this, Director Phillips, as I mentioned last week, this seems to be a work in progress. This is not going to be the panacea. It's, whether we call it council, committee, commission, this is something that's not finalized. It's just expressing our intent to do such a thing to help improve what's going on in certain parts of our community, which leads me to another point. And Mayor, let me figure out a correct way to say this. When you campaign on some very specific goals. And I think you've accomplished a lot of those things you campaign on, I think, but you've accomplished some unanticipated goals. One is how we deal with public policy. And for those of you who've been on this board much longer than me, how we deal with public policy, this has changed. We hadn't done this differently since until Mayor Scott got elected. And that's had an impact on how we address public policy. We've done it since I've been here. Many of you guys have been here much longer than me, but all of a sudden there seems to be this dire need to change how we address public policy, and we added during the agenda meeting, and it wasn't, of course, added during our last agenda meeting, and certainly this gets a little bit more personal to me, Mayor, than the other part of it, is we've also had, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Manager, do we not have an informal policy on how we select our vice mayor? Which may be another council of yours, Mr. Mayor. But Bruce, do we not have informal policy on how vice mayor is selected?
Would you repeat the question? I know you were talking about policy and small business. I'm not sure what.
Well, I'm giving the mayor some accomplishment on some other things that he's done since his election. Did we not, prior to Mayor Scott being elected, have an informal policy on how the vice mayor is selected among those who express interest in their position on this board regarding longevity on the board and not having served in that position on the board? Do we not have an informal policy?
I would say over the years, it's evolved. I don't believe there's a formal policy. I believe I would say there at some point, and to be honest, I don't know. I think I would be speaking to something that occurs in executive session, and I don't really know if that's allowed.
Well, Bruce, you take those votes. So, I mean, I'm just talking about the policy end of itself. In terms of longevity and desire to serve in that position and not having been in that position as opposed to someone who's been in that position, have we followed that since Mayor Scott? Mayor Scott, I'm giving you some more kudos on some of the things you accomplished that you didn't campaign on, how we address public policy and how we select our vice mayor. That's a yes or no. I don't want you to explain the policy. Yes or no?
And I'm sorry, yes or no to what, to which question?
The informal policy on selection of your vice mayor.
And Director Richardson, I'm not being evasive. I would say it happens every 2 years, and there's no formal rules. And I believe the board decides by majority vote who is the vice mayor. I know there's definitely no formal process in place besides being in a room and voting to see who gets to 6 votes first.
Okay, let me phrase it another way. Is there an unwritten informal policy that we've utilized in the past prior to Frank being elected the mayor that we've utilized?
I believe in the past and in some occasions, there's been deference to individual who has the longest tenure, who has not been elected or selected to be vice mayor. But again, that's nothing, I mean, and it's happened before Mayor Scott was elected, I believe multiple times. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. And since my tenure here, I hadn't seen it happen until Mayor Scott was elected. So Mayor, you campaigned on some very specific intentional goals, and I think you've accomplished some unintentional goals. You certainly changed how we deal with public policy during agenda meetings, and Director Phillips, I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
No, I think you explained it well, Director Richardson. I don't have anything to add to that.
Director Wright?
To ask for a summary or some type of description of what Small Business Development Center does now. As I told you, when I took my seat on the board, it was an incubator. And as I recall, when this Hinton Center was developed, CDBG dollars were used to pay for that renovation. Hang on. Sorry. CDBG dollars were used to pay for that renovation. I don't know if we paid those bills off as far as the Hinton Center is concerned. I do recall that it used to be, as I said, when I had my company, we were recruited to be a part of it, the initial kickstart of it. And I just don't know what it does anymore. So I would like some information. I know you said that it was your decision whether or not Mr. Rainey came and gave us a presentation on what the Small Business Development Center does. I would just like to know. I have small businesses in my community. I like to refer them so that they can get some guidance. When I had my company, I worked with UALR Small Business Development Center. I went through their business plan writing workshops. I worked with Mr. Timothy Lee there. I worked with the Federal Small Business Administration. I worked with local banks, and I was able to get, I think people forget this is Tuesday night. But I just want to know what it does. Are we trying to help our businesses get loans? Are we trying to help them of what? I don't know what we do. Do they have business offices in there anymore?
So thank you so much, Director Wright. You are correct. I'll wait for it.
Well, while we're waiting on the mayor, Director Phillips, can you briefly give us the intent of this legislation that you propose and what you expect us to do with this? Oh, there she is.
Well, I'll answer that after the mayor addresses Director Wright.
Thank you so much, Director Wright, and thank you, Director Phillips. And Director Wright, you are correct. At the last meeting, you did request an update on the small business office, and I shared with you that we would give a thorough update. Believe the Mr. Rainey conversation was separate and in particular to Director Phillips' piece of legislation. We do have today our Chief Financial Officer, Sarah Linehan, Vitesh, who is our procurement officer, as well as Mr. Rainey, who represents Sarah represents all of finance, and everything runs up through Sarah. So Sarah, if you'll just kind of briefly And again, Director Wright, what we wanted to do is make sure you have a thorough presentation. So today is just to give you a brief presentation, but we'll have a policy discussion with a thorough presentation. Today was just to make sure we had someone available for you.
Okay, so during the 2021 budget discussions, when we went through some of the personnel changes, we did mention that in finance, one of the personnel changes was the small business development office. We had moved under finance and had created that position. We exchanged another position for it. Derek Rainey was selected for that position. He had been our assistant procurement director, and prior to that, he had worked in community programs. And so Derek has been in that role really since almost a year. I think he's coming right up on his anniversary in that role. So the reason that we felt that it belonged in finance and so closely related to procurement is because of the outreach we're doing with small businesses to help them to do business, not only with the city, but also to serve as a liaison with other city departments, including Treasury, with respect to business licensing, with our planning and development office, with the obtaining permits and that type of thing. We also had the Clinton School of Public Service work with us and volunteer to work with Mr. Rainey as we were getting the office going. We have vendor fairs where we reach out to vendors. We are connecting them with the small business administration. We're partnering with them. We do, as you mentioned, some of the banking. We do referrals to Southern Bancorp's community partners, Encore Bank, Bank of America Business Development, and we've got other partners that we're reaching out to. We work very closely with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. One of the things we're trying to do with procurement and the Small Business Development Office as well is to help get minority vendors certified and to help with that process. We have open working hours where procurement will go to the Small Development Office to help vendors get registered in the procurement system so they know how to submit bids, do business with the city, get on the list for that type of thing. As far as office space, I mean, there is coaching and consulting that's going on. As far as office space, the small business office is still located in the Willie Hinton Center. There are renovations currently going on. And so I think Derek's office is, he's working on the third floor right now during the renovation, but upgrading the Wi-Fi in the office space to be able to provide a better environment for development of small business. Derek, like I said, is here. Originally, we didn't anticipate him being here. He had to rearrange childcare to manage to be here tonight, but he is here if you have any specific questions.
No, when I said office space, when it started out, it was an incubator and small businesses were able to have an office in there or a place where they could be, have like a call center or something. Because most of them, when I started out, and a lot of them still do, work out of their house. So that's what I was referring to when I asked about office space.
Well, there are renovations going on currently at Willie Hinton, and I'm not sure what all will be expanded. Currently, the budget for the small development or business development office, again, as 2021 was still part of the pandemic, there's not a large budget. It was mainly just office supplies, but it's truly being kind of a liaison and a connector to, you know, the Chamber of Commerce, Small Business Development Administration, the procurement, facilities, banking opportunities, just, you know, linking them to the various services available to get businesses up and going. And then trying to bring in experts. We also, Derek will take them to various department meetings of city directors and all, so that they can kind of get an understanding of how the city works and how to do business with the city and what types of things they might encounter with their businesses.
So is it just him or is there other staff that support him?
Well, currently, and like previously, and it had been vacant for quite some time, but it was in the executive administration department, and there was one person responsible for the Small Business Development Office. So while Derek is kind of a lone ranger right now, staff-wise, as I mentioned, the Clinton School of Public Service partnered with him. He works very closely with the procurement division, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, bringing in different staffing as needed.
Well, I'm familiar with Mr. Rainey, and I know he's an excellent young man, and so I feel about him like I feel about Ms. Dean. It's in good hands. I have no question of that. I just didn't know what it did anymore. So it sounds like we have a really good plan, but I want you to know that I'm very supportive of this. Now, when it comes to our American Rescue Funds, would this not be an eligible project for that, Mayor, since it's getting businesses and possibly back up to speed and helping them keep their business?
Well, first, Director Wright, thank you for your support of the efforts of our Small Business Development Office, which is held within our Finance Department. And we thank you for your recognition of the great work that Mr. Rainey, as well as Mr. Vitesh Patel and Sarah are doing in the midst of the pandemic. I do just, to answer your question directly, at this point in time, we have not identified, from a compliance standpoint, areas within ARPA, to answer your question directly. Secondly, a few different things I just want to highlight of some of the work, and many remember the Small Business Office back in the day. Mr. Moore, if I'm correct, it used to be a part of the role of Mr. Odis, as well as Miss Chauncey Holm. And Holland, sorry, I apologize. Chauncey, if you're watching, please apologize. She's a dear friend, and is now with Windrock International, leading their women empowerment initiatives. And so that position lay dormant for at least 2 or 3 years. We made the strategic decision because of the great work that Mr. Rainey was doing within procurement. And we knew also Mr. Rainey is he is an entrepreneur as well and has a strong background in that. We thought, oh, what better way to have someone who understands procurement as well as entrepreneurship to be our small business development liaison and officer in connection to the community. So that's the reason why he's there. Secondly, we all are aware there are a number of different renovations that are happening at the Willie Hinton Center. Part of that process will be a co-working space for entrepreneurs at the Willie Hinton Center. We, in the Office of Executive Administration, the City of Little Rock, in totality, and we've shared this via press releases and social media and board communication. And I know the board gets a lot of communication, so sometimes things are missed. But we instituted Build Academy earlier this year. Stands for Businesses United in Leadership Development. And it's basically a small business incubator where we are helping not only existing entrepreneurs, but aspiring entrepreneurs to understand the lay of the land from as simple as, not simple, but many complex things as it relates to human resources, marketing, counting, things of that nature, business plans. And so they meet, I believe, 6 or 7 weeks. They're the current cohort, the first or inaugural cohort is now in its 3rd or 4th week. They're meeting.
She was describing.
Yes, they're meeting at the UA, due to the renovations that are being done at Willie Hinton. They're meeting at the UA Little Rock downtown office. I was able to visit them. I believe we may have had 75, 85 applicants that applied to be a part of this process. I think we have 50 or 60. We've also had some strategic partnerships with Garver, University of Arkansas, Pulaski Tech, UA Little Rock, and some other businesses that are around the city that are helping serve as experts in these various fields and provide education for these entrepreneurs to prepare them to do more business in the city of Little Rock, as well as with the city of Little Rock. And so that's what's been going on. Again, I know the board gets a lot of communication, but that has been sent to the board. And they're in their 3rd week, and there'll be a second cohort after a brief break. I think they may do 12 weeks, I believe. So they're in the 3rd or 4th week. But feel free, I believe they're there every Monday at 6:30, Mr. Rainey. Thursday, how about you give a brief preview?
Thank you, Mayor, Board. To your question, Mayor, Build Academy has been meeting now. Well, incubator program for established as well as startup businesses who are here in the city. We're trying to get the city with the state, as well as making sure that they have the business essentials to be the front door for entrepreneurs. As far as the speakers goes, we have a facilitator who is the dean, assistant dean, I believe, of the UA Classic Tech, and she also teaches the entrepreneurship course there. She's been doing that for 13 years, so she's very well established. She's also a business owner as well. And then we have industry experts to come in and do a roundtable discussion with each cohort or with the classes at the second half. We do have, as Mayor mentioned, we did have 76 applications, and then we selected 13 to be in the build cohort, and we're engaging 51 businesses or entrepreneurs in a build preparatory academy where we share with our partners, whether it be the Venture Center, Little Rock Chamber, SCORE, Remix Ideas, Little Rocket Academy, ASV TDC, as well as AEDC. They are all partners in this effort with Southern Bancorp as well as Hope Credit Union, where we are providing resources to business owners throughout the city. They don't have to be a part of the Build Academy specifically, but we also share those resources openly with those who inquire.
Mayor,
Director Wright.
are any of these companies construction related?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I believe I saw something about a youth bill grant that had come to our city in some form. And I would like to know if they can work with that or be getting ready to be at least subcontractors on some of the city's contracts, because most of the work that we let out is in the construction field. And so I know when we had our company, we worked with the housing department, my husband did. And that's how he got his start. And he was able to go on to bigger and better things. So it was a good marketplace for us. So I'm very supportive of this. And I'm so glad that it's in Derek's hands. I know it's in good hands. So I'm very, very pleased.
And I'll look into that effort as well.
Thank you so much. And
Mayor, while Derek is here, Derek, the youth bill grant that Doris referenced, that's a federal grant targeting a specific population that you have to meet certain criteria. Am I correct?
Sure, I will check into it. Technical Assistance Center. So to determine where they are in the stage of development, our companies may be a little bit younger as far as business experience and revenue, if those are some of the requirements that go into it. But we are trying to see where people are and meet them where they are to see where they want to go.
Well, if I understand youth bill correctly, it's targeting that population that we call disconnected adults and youth, those who are unemployed or underemployed, and even some who are ex-felons. And in the initial grant that we were awarded, I think we had listed one of our houses in our land bank as part of the application, and we have an extension due to COVID, but they have a specific population who typically hadn't been involved in any kind of employment efforts at all.
Well, I do know that we are working with how to have extension arms of the
as well as the Workforce Center, who's the primary administrator. Thank you.
And Derek, one final thing, when we were putting our company together, we were able to access a program out of the Arkansas Department of Highway and Transportation. They had a minority contracting program, and that program actually assisted us with our bookkeeping expenses, which was critical. And we never had a tax problem. And so I don't know if they still have that program, but if you could look into that, because I did not hear them as a partner.
I did not mention them, but I'm now aware of it, so we'll explore that engagement.
Yeah, I do have a little knowledge.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
thank you so much, Derek. We do appreciate you and your hard work. Director Hines,
And
Vice Mayor
May I
Hines,
have a
rather.
question for Derek in a second, but Director Phillips, on this, I had an exchange with the constituent, I think a friend of yours, that was questioning why we wanted a little more information. But, when I looked at this this resolution. It's creating essentially, it looks like a temporary advisory council, but this constituent told me that the goal is to become a committee or commission be run by local citizens. So is it your intention that this be a temporary committee or something that's going to be more longer term?
Excuse me. Director Hines, I think when we discussed this a couple weeks ago, the intent was for us to, well, I shouldn't say we, my intent was for us to do this, see how it works. And then if it's something that this board or City Hall thinks is productive for us to go forward, at that point, we would decide whether this would actually become a commission like our other commissions. So the resolution as it stands is a temporary council, which is aimed at producing recommendations by June of 2022. Then at that time, I think we as a board can evaluate whether it worked or not, and then determine whether this type of council should be something on a permanent basis like our other commissions.
Okay, thanks. And I apologize. I had a flat on the way here that day. That's why I wasn't at that meeting, literally. And I couldn't get a tow truck to, I've got a.
That's right. You weren't here. Okay, that's right.
So, Mr. Rainey, I got a quick question. So how do you envision working with this advisory group? I think that's one of the reasons that Director Adcock and I is kind of want to get your vision for how to use them as assistants. It looks like you're running an incubator and trying to tie in to learning how to do business with the city and stuff. How do you envision working with this? Because I'm assuming you're going to be one of the 2 staff members working with this advisory group.
I think Director Hines, not specifically. The council aligns with the work that we do on a daily basis. As far as even from the job description, it included a lot of the things that the council wants to make recommendations for, and it would be they would focus on policy, but we're doing the day-to-day work. So as far as the vision of working with the council, it can be any staff member, but it does align with the directives that are in the job description of the office, as well as the goals and vision for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Are there any questions for 6 and 7? Thank you again, Mr. Rainey and Ms. Linehan. Seeing no question for 6 and 7?
Yeah, we're going to get a 7, are we going to get a report from Ms. Linehan on 7?
If you're asking for, yes.
Yes, please.
Could you pull up the board communication, please, and we'll walk through it. Okay. So this is the same format that we've used in the past. This is a budget amendment to the 2021 fiscal budget. We've got 21 adjustments that will be discussed in detail as we go through. The table that follows in fiscal impact is a summary, so we can come back to that after we go through the individual adjustments. So if you'll slide down to page 3, please. Okay, so we're going to go through the general fund adjustments first. The first adjustment will be to general fund revenues. And so there's a kind of crosses over to the next page. If you can put them side by side, I get why they can't. But so we went through each category of revenues in the general fund and recommended adjustments. The first is to the property tax revenues. And if you can go ahead and slide down to the next page where the table is, and then I'll talk through it. Yes, right. Now scroll up just a little bit more. Top of page 4. Okay. So property taxes, we're increasing the budget $810,000. You'll recall at the beginning of the year, I told you that we received the excess commissions associated with 2020 too late to be recorded as 2020 revenues. So they had to be reflected in 2021. The total adjustment to property taxes is actually 1.3 million, but a portion of that shows up in a later adjustment because it's dedicated specifically to the police and fire pension funds, and it's passed through directly to those. So that adjustment is primarily due just to that excess commission being reflected in 2021 as opposed to 2020. The largest revenue adjustment will be to the sales and use tax. When we forecast sales and use tax, it was very difficult to estimate what to expect after coming from the pandemic. Of course, the first quarter was compared to pre-pandemic. So we had originally forecast that there would be a reduction of about 2% compared to pre-pandemic first quarter. Then we gradually increased that, anticipating some recovery. Well, as we've gone through, there have been several categories of sales tax that have shown increases. And I think during the pandemic, we didn't realize necessarily how much. We knew restaurants and hotels and all were way down, but a lot of that was offset by the fact that the legislature had finally implemented the tax on internet sales. And so internet sales was helping to make up that difference, which kept us at the end of last year only about 0.5% below where we had been the previous year overall in sales tax. Well, this year with businesses reopening in the second and third quarter, we saw significant increases in restaurant. Well, and this is through the end of July results with a projection through the end of the year. So this does represent the full year adjustment. So it recognizes the adjustment year to date plus a projection through the end of the year, but it excludes the category of iron, steel, and ferroalloy manufacturing. In each of the sales tax memos that I've sent to you each month, we've talked about the unusual growth in that category that I think has a lot to do with the I-30 construction and some of the other major steel construction events that have been happening in the city. That's great. The problem is, there's about 1.4 million attributed to that. The problem is we have not seen the corresponding rebates yet. And because businesses have 12 months to claim those rebates, it's highly possible that the majority of that revenue could be recaptured in rebates later in the year. So we did not include that in our adjustment in anticipation that in the next few months, a lot of that could be pulled back. Everything else is reflected in here. We took the actual results through July, projected 5% growth per month for the remainder of the year, which is a little bit less than what we've been receiving each month. But again, things started ramping up a little bit toward the end of the year, so we don't want to be too aggressive and miss our target. Then we go on to licenses and permits. So this reflects primarily increases in the zoo, mixed drink licenses. So with the reopening of bars and restaurants, the big driver here was an increase to the mixed drink license revenue and our business licenses, partially offset by a slight reduction to our planning and permits. The intergovernmental revenues were received in July. They come in one time a year. This trues it up to the actual. So we were very close in our original forecast, but the $41,975 is the adjustment to actual. The next category is charges for services. Many of our parks facilities did not reopen as soon as planned. Our community centers and things like that were still closed due to the continued impact of COVID and the lack of vaccines, especially for our children. The River Market was experienced a reduction in vendors in the River Market facility and all still, so the charges for services have been down there. Golf has seen a big increase. It was a safe outdoor activity with adequate social distancing. So our golf revenues have recovered more quickly than we anticipated, and we're increasing that $246,800. The fitness and aquatic center just reopened in July. We had anticipated it would reopen a little bit sooner than that. So the revenues are below budget in that category. The zoo, like golf, outdoor facility, adequate social distancing with their reservations. People felt comfortable going back to the zoo. So we've seen that recover. In fact, the zoo had achieved their annual budget by the I think their August sales, they had hit the annual budget. Now, this is still less than where they were 2019 pre-pandemic, but it's recovering faster than we anticipated. So we're adjusting those revenues up. Police services and false alarms, those are down 167,000. I think as people stayed home, fewer false alarms. And then so many of the online police reports and all, they're requesting those electronic, and so that has gone down. Fines and fees, our courts have come up with alternative plans. They reopened slower. Fewer cases were going on during the pandemic, fewer traffic incidents and things like that, so that the fines and fees continue to be below budget. And there have been some alternate arrangements to help people out, I think, during the pandemic. Franchise fees are up 458,000. This is a net of several different fluctuations. The electric utility fees are actually a little bit below budget. If you'll recall, we had an unprecedented snowstorm in February, so the gas revenues were above budget. Water and wastewater were down quite a bit last year, I think, to delinquent payments, as were many of the utilities. And so this year, as those are being caught up, those are increasing. So the net impact of that is an increase of 458,000. Miscellaneous revenues are just various, there's some dedicated to the pension fund, different things, but those are up about 81,100. Our investment income, though, is down 80,000 from projected, and that's due to this historically low interest rates that we're experiencing. So the net impact of all these revenue adjustments for the year is an increase of 13,867,638. And again, 12 million of that is associated with sales taxes. The second adjustment is the pass-through of revenues that are collected that are dedicated specifically to the police and fire pension fund. So you'll see the other portion of that property tax levy. And when I said 1.3 million, I'm sorry, I meant 1.1 million total for property taxes. But the pension portion of that is 325,000. And half of that goes to the fire pension, the closed fire pension, the other half goes to the closed police pension. Insurance turned back from the state was actually a little bit less than what was projected. And then the miscellaneous pension revenues, this is tied to, like, the police pension gets 10% of fines and fees. With the decrease in fines, the pension also gets a decrease shared. And then there's some auction of confiscated goods that was down, which also impacted that. So the net impact, and not sure why that says vehicle storage fund, but that's to the closed pension funds, is $190,000. Then you'll see that that gets passed through directly to the pension fund on the expense side, with $150,903 going to the fire pension and $39,540 going to the police pension. I don't know why this says fleet fund. So anyway, that's the expenditure side. The net impact of the general fund is zero on that adjustment, that pass-through adjustment. The next adjustment has to do with personnel cost. So the first part of that is workers' compensation and other post-employment benefits. Our workers' compensation cost has exceeded budget by almost 30% year to date. There was some change in state legislature that changed cancer to become a workers' comp type of event for fire. And then there's been some other just experience. I don't know if some of this might be related to COVID, but we've experienced an increase in workers' compensation. And then other post-employment benefits is actuarially determined. And so the contribution, that's for health insurance for our retirees before they hit age 65. So that's mostly related to police and fire officers that leave after they've reached their 100% pension they can draw from LOPFI and move on to other employment. The emergency management, one of our emergency management personnel in the two-person office, his salary used to be covered by FEMA. a FEMA grant. That is no longer the case. And so the Emergency Management Office had to move his expenditures to the general fund. The housing and neighborhood programs, that is a combination, or actually that is associated with equity adjustments to the code enforcement and to supervisors to improve recruiting and retention that were made early in the year. The decrease in parks and recreation part-time was due to the slow reopening of programs, so there was less of a need for the part-time and overtime staff, so there's a decrease in that of 264.5. Golf part-time and overtime increased with the increased activity, and as you noticed in adjustment 1, with the increase of over 246,000 in revenues, that more than offset the increase in part-time cost. The big adjustment in this category is to fire, overtime, and other personnel costs. Fire, they budgeted and entered the year anticipating 7 retirements. And I think throughout the year, they've had 36 retirements or separations from service, and they're now expecting another 8. So with those separations of service, obviously with fire, you've got to keep your fire stations manned at all times, so there's much increased overtime. This is also associated with some COVID-related absences and overtime associated with that. Through August, fire was running 8.5% above budget. So this takes to the end of the year where we expect fire to end up. And then our vacation sick leave payouts, these are the amounts that we pay that employees have earned that they have not used when they separate service, then we pay out their vacation and sick leave balances. We have achieved, through the end of August, we've paid out our annual allocation for vacation sick leave, so this $1 million will take us to the end of the year. And then we also have achieved our vacancy savings goal for the year. So we've increased, we know just with the time it takes to fill vacant positions, that we'll have this much more vacancy savings that will offset that increase in the vacation sick leave payouts. So the net adjustment to personnel cost in the general fund is an increase of $4,635,000 approximately, of which $3.8 million is associated with fire. The fourth adjustment is a change in outside agency contributions. The board approved an allocation to Oakland Fraternal Cemetery on January 19th, resolution 15380, to provide $50,000 for cemetery maintenance. And then the Museum of Discovery, after the historic snowstorm, suffered some water damage and flooding, and the board authorized in June a resolution to provide $175,000 to the Museum of Discovery for mold remediation. So this $225,000 is associated with those adjustments. The fifth adjustment is for other additional operating expenses. The first is the annual property and liability insurance renewal. This was approved by the board, resolution number 15476 in June. And this is the increased cost of the, that will be incurred. The policy renews July 1, and so 6 months of the increased cost for the property and liability insurance. The executive administration, LRTV, with all of the remote meetings, board meetings, commission meetings, and other things, they've had to have additional equipment. And so they were over budget $15,000 in equipment directly related to the meetings. Housing and neighborhood programs has an increase of $77,000. This is improvements. Part of it, about half of it, is to accommodate enhancements to the 311 app for additional interfaces associated with planning calls and other things managed in housing. And then there's some land improvements in housing that make up the other half of this. And this is associated with fencing and parking pads at some of the code enforcement vehicles have been damaged because they're not secured. And so this would anticipate at Oak Forest, West Central, and Valley Drive Neighborhood Resource Centers, these parking pads and fencing to protect the code enforcement vehicles. The golf operating expenses in Pro Shop, a lot of this is material that is turned around and sold at the Pro Shop or concessions. It's primarily at the Rebsamen course. This is an increase in expenses there. And again, in combination with the personnel costs, still significantly below the increased revenue. And then finally, the zoo maintenance and gift shop merchandise. Again, we didn't, in the 2021 adopted budget, we actually reduced the zoo's maintenance budget by $275,000, I think, because of the anticipated lower revenue with the COVID impact. The zoo achieved their revenue. We've increased their revenue budget, so we're giving that maintenance money back. The remainder of this is the the gift shop merchandise. They've had a lot of sales in the gift shop and have had increased merchandise cost. So that's $852,260 in additional expenditures that were not anticipated at the time of the budget. Excuse me. The sixth is an increase in transfers out to fund the build out of the first floor of the 12th Street Station, to fund the city's share of the federal consultant contract, and to provide emergency housing services for the homeless and victims of Hurricane Ida. So the city has already set aside $750,000 for the first floor renovations of 12th Street, but due to cost increases during the pandemic, we are anticipating that we're going to need another $750,000 in order to construct that area. It will be recouped over time from the tenant lease contracts, but obviously the improvements have to be made up front. The board approved the joint contract with the Little Rock Port Authority, Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority, and the Bill and Hillary Clinton Airport for federal consulting services back in April. Resolution 15441. The city's share of that is what is included in the adjustment, which is $24,000. And then the homeless emergency services and housing. You'll recall back in January and February when we had the snowstorm, we had a need to be able to provide some temporary housing for our homeless. And then when Hurricane Ida hit last month, we provided some temporary vouchers for shelter for just I think it was a maximum of 3 days for people who had sought refuge in Little Rock. So the combined amount is $100,000. The seventh adjustment is the allocation of our vacancy savings and the vacation sick payouts experienced through July 31st, 2021. So the table shows the middle column is the original personnel budget that was adopted. The first column is the allocation of vacancy savings. So as positions are vacant, the amount of the personnel cost that was not expended, that was included in the budget, is reduced from the budget for that pay period and offsets the vacancy savings allocation. The reverse is true with the vacation sick payouts. 100% of the accrual is for the cost is in executive administration. And then as those costs are paid out, we give the money back to the departments where the cost is incurred so that their budget isn't suffering for a payout of vacation. You don't know who's going to leave at the beginning of the year, so we budget it all in one place and then allocate it as the year goes on. The last three columns represent the adjustments to personnel that I've already discussed. The increase to the vacancy savings allocation is the $1 million at the top. The increase to the vacation payouts is at the top. The vacancy savings is at the bottom, and then the pass-through to police and fire is reflected. And then the other adjustments, the largest being that increase to the fire overtime, is reflected in the next to last column with the amended personnel budget for all of the divisions on the far right. The eighth adjustment is not actually an adjustment. If you'll scroll down to the top of the next page. So after the audit at the end of the year, we make a recommendation, and we have not increased our restricted reserve for some time. It's been at $10 million for the last couple of years. We would like to recommend that we increase that by $2.5 million, which does not affect the budget. It just reallocates the fund balance into that restricted reserve, which helps to build that restricted reserve. We're going to be having a financial policy discussion, hopefully in a few weeks. And one of the recommendations that we'll be bringing to you is a full fund balance, unassigned fund balance policy that includes replenishment, how it's spent, and restricted reserve is a part of that. And the recommendation will be that the restricted reserve always be at a minimum, half or 5%, excuse me, of the annual revenue budget, with the remainder of what we're going to recommend in the unassigned fund balance. And we'll talk about that in more detail later when we do the financial policy discussion. But currently that 10 million only represents about 4.8% of our annual revenue budget. So with 12.5 million, we would get up to in excess of 5%. And I believe that would carry us through with the revenue budget for next year as well to get us to 5% of the annual revenue budget. So that concludes the general fund adjustments. We'll move to the street fund in a moment. But if you want to turn back to the first page, the summary of the general fund in that first table. So we're increasing the revenue budget by $13.8 million. Go up one more page. The top. There, right there. The $13.8 million is the revenue adjustment. That's an increase. The pension pass-through, the increase to revenues is offset directly by the expenses that get passed through to the pension fund. So there's no net impact of that. The increase in personnel cost was a total increase in expense of $4.6 million, which is a reduction to fund balance. The increase in the outside agency contributions is a reduction to fund balance. The increase in transfers out is a reduction. The increased operating expenses is a reduction. So the net impact, though, the revenues are exceeding expenditures by $7,281,683. Now we are going to increase the restricted reserve. We're also recommending that we don't try to plan additional operating expenses immediately with this additional income. With the expiration of the 3/8 cent tax and with not having the new 1 cent tax, we think that this should be held for capital expenditures that may be necessary that we no longer have funding for, rather than trying to build it into the operating budget before we know how our revenues are going to trend in the future. So right now, we think that we should hold that 7.2 million, again, net of the fact that we're increasing the restricted reserve to have some flexibility for needed capital expenditures like fire trucks, police vehicles, things like that. So now if we'll go back to page 8, the street fund adjustments. So the same thing happened with the street fund that happened with the general fund, the excess commissions being late. That's the reason for the increase in the property tax levy that's dedicated to the street fund. That's the $356,000. The state gas turnback, a portion of that is the 1/2 cent sales tax. With the increased gas usage with people returning to work, first you just have the basic per gallon fuel cost that's in the regular turnback. And then with the 1/2 cent dedicated sales tax to street, that is also increased. So we anticipate by the end of the year that the street turnback will be $2 million more than originally budgeted. Miscellaneous revenues will increase just $9,500. And then the investment income, like the general fund, with historically low investment rates. And then you'll recall too, last year we had saved fund balance from the street fund to use for the pine cedar matching of the project with UAMS, and that lowered cash resources in the or in the street fund. So there's also lower funds that are earning investment income. There's a reclassification of transfers in. So last year we had the health insurance premium holiday carryover that is part of a one-time carryover. In the current year budget, we saved that health insurance premium to use to offset the increased health insurance expense in 2021's budget. In the general fund, we showed that as prior year carryover, which was appropriate. When we did it for the other funds, we didn't realize, or we just neglected to classify it as carryover prior year. Instead, we called it transfers in. The reason it's important is when we're looking at the budget next year, this is not something that's ongoing. It was a one-time thing in 2021. So we just want to make sure it's in the right place. So there's no net impact. It's just a reclassification between transfers in and carryover prior year. You'll see that on the other funds coming up. That number 11 is an increase in transfers out. So the street fund has its own special project fund for street projects. And these are street projects that have come up since the adoption of the budget that increase transfers from the street fund to street fund special projects to fund those activities. So the first was a complete streets match of $50,000. The second was the Bimey Ridge Water Improvement Drainage Project, which was $92,750. The city's share of the Southeast Trail Project in partnership with Pulaski County was $325,000. And then emergency repair on Riverfront Drive, I think there was a sinkhole, $170,000. So the total is $637,750 in additional expenditures. So in the street fund, and I'm sorry about jumping back, but the summary, the net impact of the street fund is an increase in fund balance of $1,611,500, which reflects the increased revenue and the increased expense. The fleet fund is the next fund that we're adjusting. We're reducing the revenue that the fleet fund receives in internal billings for fleet labor and fleet parts. Because we had the 3/8 cent and we were able to continually renew our police vehicle fleet, we've had quite a few less repairs and maintenance in keeping that fleet refreshed. And so the fleet labor and parts cost has gone down. So the internal billings have gone down by $700,000. Number 13 on the next page is a reduction in fleet personnel cost. And this has been due to vacant positions and the difficulty in filling them in the fleet division. So they've experienced lower labor cost. Then adjusting our fleet operating expenses based on actual experience. So there's been a lot of land maintenance necessary in the fleet parking area, an additional $300,000, and that has been offset by reduced part cost, reduced contract for engines, drivelines, and things like that, and a slight increase in depreciation expense associated with some new vehicles. So the net impact is a reduction of $225,000 in expenditures to the fleet fund. The 15th adjustment, you'll recall at the beginning of the year, the board approved utilizing fleet fund balance for upfit for 26 police vehicles. So there was a transfer of $738,000 to fund that upfit out of the fleet fund to a project for the police vehicle upfit. So the net impact to the fleet fund is a reduction of $863,000, of which the majority is that transfer for the vehicle upfit. Next, the vehicle storage fund. So vehicle storage has had quite a bit more auction sales this year. Auction sales were suspended for quite a bit of the year last year due to COVID. This year, they've had auctions in every month. And so the anticipation is that we'll be $300,000 over budget at the end of the year. The next adjustment is just the reclassification between transfers in and prior year carryover, which is the health insurance portion for the vehicle storage fund. And then the next is the reduction, number 17, the reduction in expenses in vehicle storage for towing, but there's been increased land maintenance associated with fencing that offset that reduction. So the net impact is 0 with the categories changing there. The waste disposal fund is the next fund that we'll talk about. If you'll go to the top of the next page, you'll see the numbers. Yes. So these are changes that have occurred since adoption of the budget. The decrease in landfill fees is associated with the temporary loss of customers that occurred during construction of the new cell. We talked about that at the end of the last year. It was slow at the beginning of the year and is now ramping back up. Then also the sanitation fees are trailing budget by $219,000. Yard waste and compost is $18,100 below budget. Those declines are partially offset by increased auction proceeds of vehicles and equipment that go back to waste disposal to be reinvested in other vehicles, $302,500. Like all the other funds, investment income is below budget due to the historically low interest rates. And then you'll see just the reclassification between transfers in and carryover prior year for the health insurance savings. The next line is the increase in workers' compensation in the waste disposal fund, just like the general fund, the workers' compensation cost has increased. And so that's $125,000 over budget. Number 20 is to adjust waste disposal operating expenditures, post-closure expense, and depreciation. So vehicle fuel, diesel fuel, supplies, uniforms, fleet variable maintenance. Again, the waste disposal has had a vehicle replenishment plan where they're replacing the waste disposal trucks on a recurring basis. And that has significantly reduced the charges for maintenance from the fleet fund. The post-closure is increasing with the implementation of the new cell, and depreciation expense is also increasing with the addition of new waste disposal vehicles and equipment. So the net impact is a decrease of $431,450 to the waste disposal operating expenses. The net impact of all the waste disposal adjustments is 0. So the increase in expenditures offsets the decrease in revenues. The decrease in expenditures offsets the decrease in revenues. Finally, the parking garage fund. So parking has been slow to recover from the pandemic. Our business license revenues, and you've seen this in the variance memos that I send out monthly with the reports, they're 24% below last year because of the reduced number of taxis. And those licenses for taxis and all are dedicated to the parking garage debt service. The decrease in street cut repairs, these are the charges for street cuts when utilities go into the streets to repair their lines, and then they reimburse the city for the repair cost. This had been really high last year due partially to the change in the board's ordinance with the penalties when they weren't repaired timely, also due to the significant work that Verizon and AT&T were doing in laying fiber throughout the city. That has decreased, and we're seeing a decrease in street cut repairs. Parking meter revenues, again, there's been very little need for parking downtown in the early part of the year, and so the parking meter revenues were down. Decrease in convention center and surface lot parking. This is primarily associated with daily parking, and the surface lot, it's down $99,100. The monthly parking at the River Market and the Convention Center have been pretty consistent, the monthly contracts, but the daily parking has been decreased significantly. And then like all the other funds, a decrease in the investment income. So the net impact to the parking garage revenues is a decrease of $311,597. So if we go back to the very first page, this table summarizes everything that we've been through. So the general fund, the revenues, the adopted budget was $210,100,969. It will increase to $224,159,000. The expenditures will increase by $6.7 million to $216,877,000. with net income of 7,281,683. And remember, we're going to transfer 2.5 million into that restricted reserve to keep it, to increase that restricted reserve to 5% of our annual revenues. The next page, the summary of the street fund. The increased revenues, partially offset by increased expenses, should result in an increase to fund balance in the street fund of $1,611,500. And increases in street fund balance are used for future street and road and drainage projects. And then the fleet fund, as we discussed, there'll be a net decrease of $863,000 to the fleet fund, primarily due to the transfers to fund the upfit for the police and fire vehicles. The other revenue and expenditure adjustments took care of the rest of that. In vehicle storage, we had the decrease in revenues of $300,000. We already had that should be an increase in revenues of $300,000. We already had a $60,000 increase, so the net impact is an increase of $360,690. And then we have the decrease in waste disposal offset by the decreased expenses for a net impact of 0. And in the parking garage fund, we have a decrease of $311,597. And that is the budget amendment. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Sarah. I want to just take time to recognize you and our entire budgeting team that have been navigating this budgeting process in the middle of a pandemic. And just wanted you to know how much we all appreciate you and the team. Because of that, due to our conservative growth budgeting strategy that we've employed, we now see that in the middle of a pandemic that due to those strategies that we now have a $7.3 million budget surplus for this year. And for the first time in several years, we're adding to our restricted fund balance and finally meeting the needs of GASB compliance of being more than 5% of our total revenue budget. And so I think that is commendable to this budgeting finance team that we've assembled, that we've been working hard at, making adjustments throughout the year as we try to be as nimble as possible through the pandemic, as well as a lot of the national economic issues that we all have to pay attention to through this process. And I believe, if my memory is correct, if we combine both the restricted fund balance and the unrestricted fund balance, it's close to a little more than $30 million. Is that correct or incorrect?
I don't remember the exact number. I do know that it was approximately 15%, and the GFOA best practice is a minimum of 17%, which represents 2 months worth of operating expenses. So when we bring forward our recommendation for the unassigned fund balance policy, we'll be looking at a recommendation to gradually get to a minimum of 17%. And then we'll incorporate what you would do when your expenditure or when your fund balance starts exceeding your requirements, how it's appropriate to use that for one-time type of expenditures or different needs, and also what to do when it falls below that. So that'll be part of what we're talking about when we come forward with our recommended unassigned fund balance policy. I do want to say too, I know sales tax is great this year, and we're very grateful for that. A lot of that growth has been with restaurants reopening, with bars reopening, with the fact that finally, after years and years of not having any collection of internet sales tax, we're seeing that come back to the city for purchases or for deliveries that are made in the city. So I think there is some catch up, kind of a normalizing of what those revenues are from what they were pre. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the true impact because the pandemic hit at the same time that we had the first year of internet sales collection. You can look at that one category of, it's like gift catalog and wholesale, I forget what they call it, but it's, anyway, the internet sales category, but that's not the full impact of internet sales. That's just the portion attributed to businesses that are not located in Arkansas. If you're purchasing from a Walmart or a Home Depot or something like that online, we were collecting those internet sales previously, or were supposed to be. But now with the full, we're seeing that full impact, that catch up of the last couple of years, I think, in the current year. And I would expect it to kind of normalize where we won't see the kind of growth year over year that we've experienced this year in the future. Hopefully we'll get to a new normal that's in that, 4%, maybe 5% if we're lucky range. But this year we've seen much greater than that, with it as high as 18 to 20% in the like April over previous April, May over previous May. And the most recent is back down to about 11 to 12%, I think, still experiencing everything being shut down in July of last year. So, and that sales tax memo will go out probably tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, I believe it is.
Just got the results today.
And then also, again, just thank you again to the team. Because I'm going literally back on memory. I remember when both the combined restricted and unrestricted was around 17 to 20 million when I walked in 2019. I know it's definitely closer to 35 to 37. And that's just a credit to conservative growth budgeting. And just, again, wanted to make sure we share appreciation you and the team and taking the vision of this conservative growth budgeting to get us to this point. So thank you.
We just need to always make sure that we're managing our ongoing operating expenditures to keep them in line with ongoing revenues and not trying to use one-time revenues for operating type expenses.
I believe that was the reason why we had a budget cut the first quarter when we
That
came.
is, that's why we did that.
That was the reason why. Conservative growth budgeting. Director Computers.
Well, a couple of things. Sarah, can you go back to the one about expenses? What we,
On the general fund, number
Well-
5, maybe?
I don't, since I don't have anything in my hand, it's,
This one, is this it?
no, the one that it's the one, it's a bigger slide that shows fire.
Okay,
overtime.
that's personnel cost. That would be number 3.
Is there's no police overtime or personnel costs?
There's no, police has stayed within their budget this year.
Pardon me?
Police is staying within their budget.
Okay. And then I agree with you completely about putting that money in the reserve. We've always tried to get to at least 10%, and I think we need to try to get there. But as well, just as an aside, I'm glad you brought the thing about the internet sales tax. You have to understand that one of the people that got it done was Tom Carpenter. He wrote an amicus brief, is one of the 2 people that got accepted for an amicus brief for that. So part of the credit for getting this done is Tom. But Frank and Sarah, maybe I'm the worst one here about getting information, but this is the first time I've seen this, right? Correct.
The first time you've seen what?
All your presentation.
It was distributed Friday with the board packet.
Yeah.
Again, it was an agenda item. It was the board communication in the board packet.
Okay, then I just missed it, then then that's my fault. I find when Larry Lichtke brought up that we needed to do this, it's getting more and more and more complicated every year that we do this, and we go over it so quickly. I'm asking one question and I'm missing the next 3 things. And you do a great job of being able to say all these things as quickly. But if we could get a hard copy of this the Friday before, it would help me be able to mark it up and that sort of thing. It's just,
Mr. Moore, what is your process when you send board communication?
So this is item number 7 on the agenda, and the board has a link on the agenda every Friday. So the item is linked, this memo is linked to the number, to the ordinance. So it's all right there, the board communication. Let me just say that typically we do multiple budget adjustments throughout the year. Obviously, with everything going on, we hadn't done one as of yet. So usually we wouldn't be as much, but that's very easy on something like this to send a hard copy out. That's not a problem. And we'll have Ashley send it out tomorrow.
Okay, if you don't mind, I needed something to mark up, to write on, and it's hard when you're going through it this quickly.
Any more questions, Director Contreras?
No, thank you. I've got some.
You have some more? Question? Do you have another question? Well, I was asking Director Contreras, did he have another question? Oh, you're done? Vice Mayor Hines?
Thank you, sir. So when you say these include tax collections through July, so that would be the reporting to us of August 22nd, last month.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
So when you said this report represents our tax proceeds through July,
So.
that was
we
what was
received-
reported to us in August? Or
No,
does
so
that
we received it on Friday. We got the numbers, so I updated the amendment before it went out. So the number is the September number for July.
Okay.
And we're got the NAICS code information today, so I'll put that memo together and you'll be receiving it before the end of the week.
Okay, so this includes the new.
It includes the most recent
Okay.
that we got just
All right.
a few days ago.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because I know we're 60 days in arrears. We'd start talking about July for this month. I just want to make sure I understood that. I think other question for you is you talk about all the growth in internet sales tax. What have you looked at as far as inflation is concerned this year? Because I think that's one of the bigger drivers than this. I know we're collecting internet sales tax, but based on what we're seeing at the grocery store, at the fuel pump, and just cost in general, that's not that as retail. So what's your view on what kind of an impact inflation's had on this and going forward? Because I don't see any end to the inflation we're experiencing right now letting up going forward.
I can tell you that grocery, and I'll double check this, but I believe that in the NAICS information I got today, year to date, grocery sales tax revenue has actually decreased from last year, which makes sense because last year people were eating at home, shopping at the grocery store, they weren't going to restaurants as much. So it's difficult to say, especially when we're comparing information to a pandemic.
Right. Well, but I get that, but Director Peck can probably also back me up. Costs at restaurants have gone up also because they've had huge inflation cost on restaurant supplies. I mean, I've seen every restaurant I'm going to. So I think we need to take a deeper dive on what inflationary impacts having on our budget numbers, because I don't think that's going to let up when we look at budgeting for the future.
And Director Hines, that may very well be true, but we're seeing the flip side on the expenditure side. As we mentioned, the cost of the build out of the first floor of the 12th Street Station, construction cost in particular has nearly doubled.
Yep.
So we're seeing it on both sides.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying for budget projection. So I do understand that the costs are going up all around. And that's all I've got on that. The glaring thing in this, and it's great that we've got all these revenues, but the glaring thing that I look at is our overtime overrun in the fire department. And this really isn't for you, Sarah. It's really directed at the board as a constructive criticism and critique, that when I look at what's going on in the fire department, we only had one recruit class last year. We've only had one recruit class this year. In negotiations last year, we gave 5 extra shifts of paid time off that increased the amount of overtime we've had. We've had attrition we didn't see coming. And I think I don't see us getting off this merry-go-round anytime soon, because there's only we've only done one recruit class this year. There's only one plan for next year that I'm aware of, unless they're going to add a second one. And some of this is self-inflicted. And the big question I had was, had we done a COLA instead of giving this paid time off, would that have been cheaper than that? We're not involved in those negotiations with our labor and the police and fire. But when I look at 3.75 million, that's 1.5 to 2 pieces of apparatus. We may not have given up that much with a COLA, but I just think it gives me great pause that we're on this ride with the fire department, and it was because of decisions that were made in leadership of the fire department to only have one recruit class each year, when we know our attrition rate's higher than that. You've got to prime the pump and have more going on. And, I don't know what a 0.5% or 1%, what that COLA looks like, but it seems to me that we could have stepped off some of this overtime. Because, the problem is, looking at it from a strategic standpoint, I know what you're getting ready to say, Sarah, the long-term exponential cost will outrun this temporary number, but I don't see this temporary number letting up, is what I'm telling you, based on our performance on personnel and hiring. And that's my concern to my fellow board members. And I don't need any other dissertations other than that. I'm just making a statement to us as a board and to the mayor, as far as leadership goes. When we sit down and start negotiating, if we do this again to ourselves, we're going to be looking at the same thing, and we can have all the revenue growth in the world, but if we're giving it back on our personnel expense because we're being short-sighted on how we're running our departments in our city, that's a concern. That's all I've got. Thank you.
May I answer one thing, though? As far as the additional
Yes, you may.
COVID, that has been allowed to be carried over because we have been short-staffed. Everybody's been very, very busy. And so there's been no push to take that time during the current year. Most departments have not. As with respect to multiple recruit classes, we've actually already been in conversations about trying to increase the number of recruit classes. For fire, there is a cost to training and overtime too, associated with holding extra classes that the chief has discussed, but that is something we're looking at. We're also looking at overfilling recruit classes where we can accommodate it to try to reduce the amount of overtime needed in the future. But those are things we're looking at, and I didn't mean to interject there. I just wanted you to know that we are looking at that.
Thank you.
And Sarah, thank you so much for that. Vice Mayor Hines, just to correct the record, just so you're aware, in 2019, I believe the overtime budget went over somewhere around $8 million. So we're really happy to see it go down to this time. You want to come up? Oh, yeah. So somewhere around $8 million in 2019, and so it's now at $3.5 million over. So that is a net decrease of somewhere around $5 million in overtime budget. So that's number one. So that's actually a very good thing. Number two, since we've been in office in 2019, we have overfilled the classes. Now, while we have one recruit class, we are overfilling the number of people that can be in a recruit class. And that is the reason why I believe to date, Sarah, we only have 14 vacancies in fire, which is stellar. And so we are excited about where we are. Clearly, the city of Little Rock, just like every other business, is experiencing a number of different vacancies. I believe the total city's vacancy is somewhere around 244 vacancies. But again, our fire department is only vacant 14 positions. That's roughly somewhere around 446 positions. And so again, we're happy that our overtime budget that has went over, and has consistently been over for the past 10 years, has not, we've actively been trying to decrease it. And so initially it was 8 million, it's now 3.5 million. So I just want to make sure I correct the record. You have that information.
Mayor, to set the record straight, this is an increase over their already budgeted overtime. So it's way more than $3.7 million.
I'm aware.
It's way more than that.
I'm sure you didn't listen to me. I said again, 2019, it was $8 million over budget. It's now 3.5. So there's a delta between 8 and 3. So that's 5 million. So in a reduction. Director Wright.
Mr. Moore, how much total investment do we have in the 12th Street station? Because it seems that we're going to be investing another 1.5 million. And I remember, think I remember correctly, that the initial allocation for that building was 10 million. And then you came back to the board and requested an allocation of an additional 2 million. And now we're investing another 1.5 to complete a building that we already have a $12 million investment in. So what am I remembering correct?
Yes, ma'am, but the caveat is that when it was planned and developed, that this was a very unique opportunity to bring in private sector investment into the building. So there's 8,000 square feet on the first floor. That's always been, the thought has always been, and the plan has always been to develop that. And we have tried multiple times. Dixon even tried to help us get some private sector investment into the building. There was a lot of reasons that it never happened, but I'm very pleased with our 3 tenants. And one of the things we wanted to make sure is that they were businesses and organizations that there was a void in the 12th Street area. So now with UMS and Southern Bancorp and Philander Smith, each sharing about a third of that space, it really is going to be a remarkable opportunity for that community. So it was always our intention to fill that out, and we didn't. Some people suggested, oh, Bruce, let's put city offices in there. The space has been there since you opened it up. But I'm glad it took a little time, because now I think we have 3 outstanding tenants. That's really going to be great for that area.
So what is the total investment after we put this in?
So, I mean, your numbers are pretty correct.
14 million.
Excuse me?
14, what I think I got is 14 million.
Correct.
14 million 500.
Correct. But and with the understanding that we will develop a lease agreement with all 3 tenants separately, which the city will recoup those dollars over time.
Now, does that include the adjacent land that we purchased for parking?
This does not. This is just for the finish out of the building.
So that additional money for the adjacent land around it, how much was that?
We haven't, there's one individual, a family owner of a home there, and so we haven't purchased any additional property.
So,
Now, we own the property just across 13th Street, across from the Hinton Center. We just don't own the property across 13th Street, just south of the 12th Street station.
so there wasn't any additional land?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Director Adcock.
Sarah? On item 18, the description up at the top does not mention the sanitation fees. Is that because of all of the utility bills that have not been paid during the pandemic, that our sanitation fees are off so much?
I'll have to follow up with Mr. Honeywell to find out. This is the trend, what we've seen year to date and projected through the end of the year, but that's likely could be.
Well, I know I talked to Mr. Ramon the other day, and he was talking about how much the wastewater has not been able to collect because of the past due water bills. And I was wondering if that was the same with the sanitation fee.
Well, the water, wastewater, and sanitation are all on the same bills.
Mhm.
So
So whenever, I know that there's been lots of people that's made applications to get their utility bills paid. So are we expecting to get any of this 219,000 back when those utility bills are being paid?
I don't know if that'll happen in the current year or if it'll happen subsequent. I mean, we reflect as revenue whatever we actually collect.
If
So-
you would check on that for me, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Adcock. Director Phillips?
Thank you, Mayor. This question for Sarah as well. Sorry, Sarah. Again, to echo what the mayor said, thank you for the presentation. I did have opportunity to look through it, and I brought it with me today. But the question I had, I think the mayor kind of brought this up a little bit, but I just want to make sure it's clear for our visitors or people viewing. The restricted reserve that we're going to get to 12.5 million, that's not our total reserve, correct?
Correct. Correct. That's just the portion that we are not allowed to spend under very strict circumstances. There, unless there was some kind of an unbelievable emergency.
Okay.
So it's-
And so we have a separate amount of money that we can use more freely. I mean, I hadn't been through the budget process
Right,
before.
so for example, even just for cash flow purposes, our sales tax revenues traditionally are much higher, later in the year than in the very beginning of the year. Our property tax usually comes in October. The majority of it comes in at the end of the year. So the revenue streams are not consistent throughout the year. They're not ratable throughout the year, but a lot of our expenditures are. You've got to keep the police department running, the fire department running, accounting running, whatever. So our expenditures at certain times of the year exceed the revenues that are coming in during that period. On an annual basis, we adopt a balanced budget. So there's got to be a certain amount of cash flow available to accommodate the times when expenditures exceed revenue collection. And then by the end of the year, you're back to, where you need to be. So the unassigned fund balance handles that cash flow. It also provides for typical rainy day type needs, variations in budget projections. But the restricted reserve is a portion that we keep kind of as an emergency fund should something happen that we have to access it. And since it was established, we've never accessed that restricted reserve.
And thank you for that last question. The restricted funds, you said we want to be at 5% of our general fund revenue. What about the unrestricted? Is there a percentage goal there as well?
That'll be a board policy decision. The board, when they adopted the restricted reserve years ago, said that it should be 10 million or 10% of annual revenues by 2002 or 3. I don't know. We never got there by the time frame that we were supposed to get there. And we only recently in the last 4 or 5 years got to the 10 million. The thing is, the bigger picture and best practice isn't the size of your restricted reserve, but your combined unassigned fund balance. Now, even though the restricted reserve is restricted, internally by this board, it's not restricted outside of the government by another legislature. So it is considered part of unassigned fund balance by the regulatory bodies. And so the recommendation is that combined, that should be at a minimum 17% of annual revenues, which represents 2 months worth of expenditures.
Perfect explanation. Thank you, Sarah. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Again, you and the team and the conservative growth budget strategies that we've employed to get us to this point. And just want to again reiterate all the hard work of our finance team to get us to this point. Director Wright?
Mayor, now that we finished with that, I wanted to ask Mr. Moore if he could give me an update on the West Central land acquisition. If you can't provide it today, then I'd like a report on that.
We did, the Parks team did meet with the representatives and And so there's been no agreement at this point.
So what is the plan?
I mean, we're going to continue to talk to them. But we set aside a certain amount of money, this board did, and so we're just gonna continue to talk to them, see where they are. But I don't really want to publicly negotiate.
I understand that. That's why I said if you don't want to do it now, you can give me a report. I appreciate that. And I do have a purpose for bringing that up. I need my colleagues to be aware of what's going on because this was brought out last year and an offer was put on the table. No movement, no action was taken. And so now that brings us to this point where other parties have gotten involved, which has increased the price. So I just want to make sure that everybody hears what has actually happened. Thank you.
Director Computers, and then board members, just want to remind us that we do need to go into our policy discussion where we have 2 items. Director Computers.
Mayor, I appreciate your talking about what we've done to police classes. In the article in the paper Sunday, I thought was real good. I would like either you or Bruce or the police chief to give us a list of the enhancements or inducements we're using. I understand we have the $5,000 bonus back in place. And what else are we doing to try to recruit and retain policemen? If we could get something that we can look at and discuss and see what we can be doing to enhance that. So
Sure thing. We'll get a memo to you so board members are aware, and just to kind of reiterate some of Director Computers has shared, just for board members who may not be aware, may not know, part of our recruiting efforts for police officers is that we give any new police recruit that graduates a $5,000 bonus. If that police graduate happens to live in another city outside of Little Rock and chooses to move to Little Rock within the first year of employment, they're able to obtain additional $5,000. There are other benefits that we utilize within the recruiting process. We'll get you a memo, but those are 2 of the main big things that we do.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate continuing doing those 2 things, but I think we need to be looking, especially with North Little Rock, sending out advertisements that they want to recruit our policemen, what we need to be doing to enhance what we're doing. Secondly, before we go into our other meeting, we all got a letter from Mark Stodola. Here, you got this.
Have not.
Can we, I'll give mine to Bruce if we can get a response to it.
Yeah, I believe me, I got it.
Since you and Sarah prominently mentioned it.
Bruce, could you find my copy since it wasn't in my envelope?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Could you send me a copy of it or find my copy? It wasn't in my packet.
And Mayor, real quickly, if Dean is finished, I'd like to dovetail Dean's points about recruitment of our police officers. I'd like to also know if we have developed or we have enhanced any take-home car policies. I know we can't quantify the impact of cars from the city going to Cabot and all kinds of other places. We certainly can quantify the fuel costs. I know we can't quantify the maintenance and vehicle replacement, so any kind of take-home car policies I'd like to see what we can do as well to help. I'm not sure I agree with the $5,000 bonus and the other $5,000 bonus. I think the bonus should be the check that they get from working in the city of Little Rock. So I have an adverse reaction to us paying that particular group of city personnel more than anyone else that we are paying any other person that receives city employment. So I don't think we should have to offer them any kind of bonus. I think the bonus is going to be the paycheck that they get, and then certainly a bonus to live here. I have a adverse reaction to that, but that's something that Bruce and Dean had has been working on how long before I got on this board, but I don't agree with that policy as a board member, as single board member. I think the bonus is the paycheck that they get. So included in all that rambling, Mayor, we can add, we'll see the kind of take on car policy adjustments that we've made, because we have cars and City of Little Rock police cars that are.
We'll make sure that's added to.
I thank you on that, sir.
Mayor, one more thing, before we go into whatever you're gonna. I received this hard copy of the liens by wards, and I'm curious, what the total amount of this is. This could be tens of thousands of dollars. And I would like to know how much of this has been collected and what is the process of us collecting it?
Sure. Yeah, we'll get that quantified and get you a memo. Mr. Moore, if you'll prepare that.
Because this needs to go back into our housing and neighborhood programs to shore up their budget and possibly help out with our code enforcement officers who are frontline in these neighborhoods.
Yes, ma'am. We'll make sure you get a memo on that.
Thank you.
Moving from there, we're going to now adjourn our agenda meeting. We're going to now open our policy meeting. With that being stated, for our policy discussion today, we have, well, first, we'll quickly, part of the emergency declaration that we passed, I believe, back in August for an additional 120 days, it stated that every 30 days, we would have a discussion as to whether or not to continue on. Director Compuris, as chairperson of the COVID-19 task force for the city of Little Rock, would you concur that we still need to continue another 30 days?
I would strongly urge that we continue what we're doing right now. The last flag was masking. There were 0 new cases in the public schools and kids not vaccinated. There were very few people that were quarantined. Number of cases are going down. Stop masking. Great article, and I'll send each one of y'all. Talks about mass changes to schools.
No need for a motion. We just needed to have a discussion. We will concur with your guidance and counsel, Director Compuris. Thank you so much for your hard work in leading our COVID-19 task force as well. We do appreciate you. We're now, as our Chief People Officer, Stacey Witherell, approaches the podium, we are now approaching and beginning our budgeting process today for 2022. As we know, one of the key components to our 2022 budget process is understanding one of our larger expenditures, which is not only one of our largest expenditures with our 2022 budget, but our most important because it's the health insurance for our City of Little Rock employees. And so after listening to a lot of feedback from members of the board, there's been a desire for the past 2 years to transition and look at and strongly look at a number of different avenues as it relates to our health insurance model. And so our health insurance broker and agent and provider is JTS Financial, led by John Starling, as well as David Chance. I think I may have saw John. If not, I think I saw David. If not, I thought I did. I see David back there. Is David back here? They're both here? Okay, great. I thought I saw both of you guys here. I know you got the mask on, but I thought I recognized you. That being stated, they're going to do a presentation for members of the board based on the feedback that this members of the board have shared with us on our health insurance policies and provide a recommendation to us. It is the intent after this presentation, of course, Q&A, that this will transition into resolutions at the next held board meeting. As we know, we're starting the budgeting process.
All right, thank you, Mayor Scott. JTS We'll do the presentation this year. Name and introduce them to you, and they discuss the healthcare status at that point. Every year we come to you, and I know that it's usually later in the year, and so this year we made sure that we came to you way before we started the budget process, so that you would have the information in order to make a decision, because I know that that's always been a concern in the past as well. They have a presentation, they have hard copies that they will pass out. And with that, I would just ask JTS to come forward and let you know the results of the RFP process.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Starling with JTS Financial. I have Jennifer Wilson who's standing beside me, who's going to go through the presentation on the health insurance. David Chance, the CEO of JTS. Elizabeth Barger, manage our account services. This is some of the team members involved with Little Rock. We've also got Charles Angel. He's the head of the public sector for JTS. And then Sarah Palmiero, who handles our wellness initiative. We have endeavored to start our own wellness plan so that we can provide a real wellness solution along the lines of what you had mentioned, Dr. Compuris, before. We want to try to create a wellness plan that actually has impact and transparency as to how it gets there. So all that being said, I'm probably going to jump a little bit through the presentation because there's a lot of information in here that may be more than you currently need, but at the same time, we thought it would be nice to identify terminology and exactly what we're looking at. So that being said, we just mentioned our team. And I think one of the things that's important is to know, how did we get to the numbers and the suggestions that we got? So to start with, you're fully insured with United Healthcare. Last year, you received a 9% rate increase, but you also received a premium holiday, which equated to about 9%. So that being said, it was pretty much a wash last year on the fully insured side. So looking at that, when they came out with, so let me back up. So in May, essentially at the end of April, we were made the agent of record, which allowed us to send out all of the information to the carriers so that we could start getting information about your group. So around the 1st of May, the first thing that we did is we vetted out all the TPAs that we felt were TPAs, third-party administration firms that could handle a self-funded administration of your health insurance claims. If you'll look at this slide, you can see we actually went to both fully insured, self-funded. We went to the TPAs, which are third-party administration firms. A lot of those are also fully insured carriers. Blue Cross does both fully insured and they do self-funded. Same with United Healthcare, QualChoice, Cigna. And then we also looked at reinsurance carriers because we're looking at a partially self-funded plan, not a true self-funded plan, because we'd like to reinsure some of the risk so that we don't have full exposure with the city. So we also went out and vetted out all of the PBMs. A lot of terminology, acronyms, I apologize. It's the nature of the beast, but a PBM is a pharmacy benefit manager. So what you have is that United Healthcare owns Optum. That is their PBM of choice. You're currently carved in on a fully insured plan. You have United Healthcare and you have Optum as the pharmacy benefit manager. Blue Cross of Arkansas uses Caremark CVS. QualChoice uses Magellan. So each carrier has a separate PBM, pharmacy benefit manager, that they combine so that they can manage both your health insurance and your self-funded. So that being said, we actually vetted out each one of those to make sure that they met the qualifications for the RFP when we presented that. One of the things that we look at, obviously, is claims versus premium. So we try to put it into a data analytics format so that we can actually see trends. If we see that the lines are going up, obviously we don't like that trend. If it's going down, that's what we're looking at to try to see, number one, what's causing our claims to go up or causing our claims to go down. If you look at this, the first slide is actually a 24-month look back. So I want to look at 2 years of data to actually get an idea how the group is running. So if you look at the numbers, there's $32 million in premium that went out on $28 million in claims. That means you're running at roughly 88% claims to premium. There is no broker commission built into this plan. So I don't have to exclude that. I have to include admin and expense. And so if I look at 12 months, so more importantly, looking at my last 12 months claims versus premium, I've got roughly 16 million in premium. I've got 13.5 million in claims going out. So we're running it up at 85% in the last 12 months. So trend or not, sometimes we can blame it on COVID. Obviously, we can't predict all claims, but at the same time, I do see that the numbers are going down a little bit. Your large claimant report. We want to look at large claimants. Now, the one thing about large claimants on a fully insured basis is this is the extent of what we get to see. If I'm on a self-funded or a partially self-funded basis, I can dive deeper into these claims to determine exactly what not only is the claim, but what's the prognosis moving forward. And what exactly is driving these large claimants? Is there anything that we can do to try to make it better for the group? So with that being said, we looked at fully insured and partially self-funded. So we're not trying to influence you one way or the other. We are just trying to take the information that we received, put it into a package to where we can determine what actually makes the most sense for the city. The one thing that we cannot do is predict claims. We can predict them based off of what's happened in the past, but we cannot predict a large catastrophic claimant. So what we're looking at is how can we mitigate the risk of those unpredictable catastrophic claims, but at the same time, try to bring more transparency and visibility to the city's claims so that we can try to impact those in a positive way. We're trying to figure out a way to create a sustainable plan for the city so that we're not just looking at every other year, trying to figure out what can we do. So that being said, I will have Jennifer Wilson go over some of the self-funded aspects of what we've discovered from our analysis.
I need my glasses for this one. Now that I look at it on the screen, it looks really small. So what we wanted to do is show you your current fully insured numbers, your renewal numbers with UHC versus a self-funded option with UMR. So the one thing I do want to say before we talk about it, because I think one of the things that's most important to know is this is not changing any benefits for your employees right now. So they would have the same health insurance benefits that they have offered to them currently. They would have the same network, which is the United Healthcare network. The only big difference is they would get a new ID card that would say UMR versus UHC. So that would be the biggest difference that the employee would see. And we're also suggesting that the rates that the employees pay currently would stay the same for 2022. So that's all good news when it comes from an employee side. So currently the fully insured, if you look at there at the bottom in the red, for the past 12 months of paid claims, we're right at 14 million. And the premium that the city's paid into United Healthcare is right at 17 million. The renewal came in from UHC at a 7.6% increase. We were able to negotiate that down to a 3.9, which gets that in off a current count for your employees right at 18.5 million for 2022. The self-funded, the recommended plan that we're looking at is through UHC's network with UMR, which is their third-party administrator. And you'll see at the very bottom, the maximum cost. That includes the reinsurance cost, the admin cost, and what they predict the claims to be for that next year, and the cap that the city would have to pay is right at 18 million. So right under what the fully insured renewal is. And that's allowing the benefits to stay the same, the network access to stay the same as well. We also wanted to talk, I'm going to flip back to slide 15. Or page 15. We also wanted to talk about Arkansas Health Network, the CIN network, and looking at recommending that for 2023. We did go through extensive review with Arkansas Health Network, and we feel until we have a full 12 months worth of claims data in a self-funded world, it's a better approach for them and for us to do that looking at 2023. And we can talk more. I can definitely take questions on that too going forward. The next piece that's very important to this conversation is the pharmacy contract. Right now, in the fully insured contract that you have with UHC, you're not able to reap any of the benefit of RX rebates or discounts. And so we were able to negotiate a very deep contract with Optum. It's through a standalone contract that would be the City of Little Rock's contract, and it would give each month, it would give rebates to the plan monthly that are guaranteed, and it's roughly right at $867,000 annually that the plan would be able to get back in RX rebates. I'm going to flip back to the first spreadsheet that we were looking at and talk about the difference in where at the bottom you'll see the funding categories, and it talks about the aggregate factors. The aggregate factors are what the reinsurance carriers estimate the max cost would be for the medical claims and the pharmacy claims. And then what we do is we take all the fixed costs from the top, where you see the reinsurance and the admin fixed costs that you have to pay monthly, and we add that to get to your maximum number at the very bottom, the 18 million. And then we take 25% off of the claims to get you to your expected, where they expect you to be right at 15 million, which is well below what you're currently paying on the fully insured. What it does is it really takes you from a very reactive approach, where we're reacting to what the insurance carrier gives us at renewal time, versus a very proactive approach, where we can control the management of your plan that doesn't only benefit the city, but also benefit your employees long-term. Our goal would be able to keep the plan consistent, be able to give them better benefits over the long haul, and bring savings to the plan at the same time.
At this point, we thought it may be more helpful to take specific questions that y'all have that would help you understand what our actual proposal is and what we're looking at as far as our suggestions.
Director Pierce.
Maybe I didn't understand what you're saying, but you're saying we need to go to self-insured plan, but maintain all the options of a United Health plan.
That is, United Healthcare was the most competitive when it came to the administrative services. And when you take that into account, that we are currently with United Healthcare using those benefits, that network, the easiest transition would be to stay with United, and the biggest savings are with United and Optum through a carved out but replaced Optum PBM.
But the way you said the network stays the same.
The network providers and the network discounts stay the same. So the same discounts that you currently get.
All you do is semantics then. Not able to sell care. What you're doing is United plans.
Well,
This is, I mean, the way you decrease cost is you increase. You're trying to get quality people, decrease the number of, give those people the business, and you get a discount from them. Not what you're saying right here.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, Dr. Compuris, a more restrictive network so that you can drive down deeper discounts. Is that correct? Is a more restrictive network so that you can drive down deeper discounts, because we're pushing more people to a smaller group of providers, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
I take on my position that my city has, I don't understand what you just said to me. And I'll have to go over and read it again. And if I had Antoine give me the things earlier.
Your internet work just like mine does, Director Pierce?
But it is, what we're doing is we're saying that we're for a different way. But we're not restricting the network, not going to really say things. I'm not sure where there we're going to make it, where we're helping our employees, which are basically a group, are not the healthiest people in the world, how we're going to help them.
And I would tell you that there's a balancing act here that we're trying to make sure that we balance the needs and the impact to the employees and to the city, the HR department, and the team itself, as it relates to the impact of narrowing the scope and the employees' access to actual care. I'm not arguing with you. I agree with you that in any situation, if I can drive utilization to a limited group of people, I am going to drive deeper discounts. But I think at this point, what we're looking at is without such disruption, we can start this ball rolling. And based off of the numbers that we have, it's very unlikely that we are going to lose in this situation. In fact, the numbers are looking somewhere to $3 to $5 million in savings to the city with this plan. And then once we do that, then we're migrating to a more specific narrow scope network the next year.
Then I mean, on page 15, and trying to read ahead a little bit, you put in there our recommendation to explore this network option more for 2023. That's what I wanted you to apply in 2021 and 2022, and now we're going to put it off another. This is nuts.
Well, and here's the thing, hold on.
I mean, to me, you're going to ask me to vote for it, and I'm not going to vote for what you just said. I'm just going to tell you right now. I think this is not what we said we were going to do. And I wish that y'all had come and said something to me, being the biggest bad guy on this board, but this is not right.
And being respectfully, I completely understand what you're saying. Our job, as we understood it, was to look at every option that was out there, try to find the options that were the most suitable, and at the same time, trying to find savings for the city and for the city employees, trying to find savings, but driving down costs to where we get to that place to where we can actually dive and try to drive down more costs. This is a long-term process. In our mind, that was our understanding, is we're looking for a plan and sustainable plan that we can drive down costs on the long term.
And I realize this is your first year here.
Yes,
and
sir.
if you go back and ask anybody that has been in this process the last 2 or 3 years, we were supposed to arrive here today, not say we've got a long-term thing and it's going to be in 2023. You're going to come back next year and say it's 2024. I mean, you know.
So I would disagree with you on that respectfully, because at this point, because we are fully insured, we are limited to the data that we have access to, claims data, very specific claims data. By moving self-funded, as you know, we have visibility now to claims data in great detail, to where then we can take the claims data to a CHN, AHN, whomever it is, and have them truly identify where we can drive those costs down. You can't get there fully insured. So it's kind of chicken and the egg, and that I've got to get off a center. Fully insured on a 2,600 life group in most cases doesn't make sense, except at the same time, I do realize there is something about being able to know that what you do is you pay your premium and you keep on going down the road. But that is not solving the problem. We recognize that. But at the same time, we were vetted with trying to find a solution, not only for just right now, but for next year and the next year to come.
But I've been told for the last 2 years that next year is this year, or next year was last year. And now we're saying it's 2023, and I have no trust that what we're doing is going to get us there. And secondly, you didn't tell me anything in there how we're going to not have some network that's going to help monitor our employees' health during this next year, and how we're going to improve it. And we hired someone that was supposed to do it, but we're not doing it. I mean, I'm just telling you, we're not doing it.
So that, completely understand your position. But what, like I said, once again, that was not our call. Our job was to go and find all the solutions that are out there and bring them to the board and make a suggestion on what we think is the best for this year, but also with the thought that this is something that is going to allow us to build upon that next year, which also includes taking the wellness program that Stacy and Jenny have put together and try to improve upon that to where we actually start creating a plan that will impact our employees' lives from a wellness plan. But you've got it. There's a lot of moving parts here. It's like an elephant. You got to take one bite at a time. And the one thing.
And John, let me step in.
Okay.
My problem is that I've been watching this, in my opinion, not take the right bite, not help our employees, and not getting us to a fiduciary responsibility where we're getting more for our bang for the money we're paying. I mean, we've got an 85 and 80% overpayment of our things for the last 2 years, as you noted. And basically the reason we're still here is because United Health had so much surplus 2 years ago that they're going to have to pay taxes on it. So they gave us a free month. I mean, I know what's happening, but this is not where I thought we were going to be tonight. And I know y'all are new in this, but my frustration, and y'all can go back and just look at the tapes every year we do this. I've been talking about since Stacy Hurst was the person in charge of looking at this when she was on the board. We've never gotten where we need to be, and we're not doing a good job of taking care of our employees, ongoing and full time. And so I appreciate y'all's effort, but maybe we ought to talk offline sometime.
More than happy to do that, and also more than happy to give you any data that you need on that assessment also.
And again, thank you, John, and Director Computers. Director Computers.
Yes, sir.
So if I understand you correctly, and I know I've had conversation with you and I know where you want to go, I think we also have to be practical. At the end of the day, we also got to understand our budget. We've already gone out to all of the major players, irrespective of where we are, whether it's fully insured or self-insured, it's a budget line item to our budget. And based on the market brought this back to us. And this is the best recommendation based on the market, because if we stay where we are, if my memory is correct, if we stay where we are, and goes back to your same argument about what's happened in the past. I remember in 2020, they increased our amount to 17%. Then we got it negotiated down to 7%. In 2021, you already shared the scenario, what happened there. In 2022, I believe the initial price range was
17%, they said.
No, it was 7%, and we got it down to 3.9%.
Frank, this is
Now-
a
now-
little bit like going to a bizarre.
Director Computers, let me finish. I didn't say anything while you were talking, please. What I'm sharing with you is that we've gone out to the market. We have to make a health insurance decision. This board shared for the last 2 years, number one, that this board wanted to move from a fully insured to a self-insured. That's number one, that this board made a request of. We tried to do it last year and we couldn't make the finances work. And on top of that, we did not have the reserve amount to even go to that point in time of about $2 million. So that's number one. Number two, this board also shared that we have to figure out a way to figure out how we can manage our employees better in regards to their wellness and their health. This board approved a wellness advisor that has been hired. It's clearly, I believe it's one or two people that's working on that process right now. Clearly, it's not where we want to be, and I believe, but this board approved that person as a first step. The second step was that this board wanted to strongly, and particularly you, Director Computer, strongly look at a CIN network to help manage that process. JTS, out of that instruction, because you asked for it, they went to it. I believe the initial amount was around $300,000 to $500,000. Was it 249 to 312, somewhere around there, if I remember correctly? Is that correct, Jennifer? That's correct. So initially, and so we shared, Stacy shared, well, when we come here, make sure we really know those numbers. So they went back out to CIN because CIN told us, if my understanding is correctly, because of us being in a fully insured model, it's hard to give us a price because they don't know the detailed data. You won't have the detailed data until you make a decision on where you want to go. So they didn't have the detailed data, but they tried their best to get to a good amount, and that's that 169. What they're sharing with you today is the plan, because we know we don't have detailed data. Is it financially feasible to add an additional 200,000 on top of this 17 million, where we're already going to be about $500,000 into the good, but knowing we're going to probably go somewhere between 3 to 4 million in savings, even better, close to 14 million. So the question, I think, to accomplish what you're asking is, we're really talking about $169,000. That's really what we're talking about. And so from that standpoint is, if what I'm hearing from you is that you would rather have the CIN this year rather than waiting till we get detailed data in 23, it's $169,000 we can add to it, but we're still going to be cheaper. Even if we add the 169, it cuts into that 500,000 to the good. We're going to now be 200,000, 225 to the good. And but if that's what you would like, because you're right, that's something you've been talking about. We got to manage the data, but you got to have data to manage. But we can start that process in 2022. But that's really what we're talking about, is that $169,000.
And you're very eloquent in doing it, and you're very good at this, and you're good at numbers. My point is that we've had the data, we've had the same insurance company for the last 3 years. If we don't have the data, it's our fault that we don't have the data. It's our data, first of all.
Stacy would have to answer that question. I don't know that answer.
I do this every day. I know that the data's there. Basically, when you look at these numbers, you go to an insurance company and you get the numbers and you're 85 or 80% below, 85 or 88% below. It's like going into a bazaar someplace and saying, this is the hat I'm going to sell you. And you say it's $1,000. And you say, well, let's negotiate. And I'll negotiate down to $100. It's worth $10. And they're making, not only they're making the delta of 85 and 80%, plus they're making administrative money off of it. It's not just that much money.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that.
And my point is, we've got the data. We've had the same insurance company for 3 years. And if we haven't analyzed the data, that's our problem. That's y'all's problem. And my point is that we need to be doing, the only way we're going to save money is what we've been saying before. You narrow the network, you put it upon a CIN network or some network to be more efficient in what you're doing. And you then can take that money and roll it back over and take care of the employees better with their health. And you don't have one employee taking care of thousands of people. And so we're doing.
Asking you speaking to your microphone.
We're doing all the right things, but we're just not. We're on the right road, but we're not getting there fast enough. This is the same thing, the same discussion we've had each year. Well, we've got a price that we can get the thing down, but we're not really going to take care of people. We've got one person taking care of it. It's crazy. And so I'll sit down and talk with y'all offline, but I'm not going to vote for this. And I'm going to be a vocal critic of it moving forward. And I'm just going to tell you,
that's your prerogative.
It frustrates me that I've been saying the same thing for 3 or 4 years. that we need to be getting there. That's the way medicine works. You can't give everybody everything. And we have to start being fiduciaries of the money, but we also need to help the people that we insure. And that's my frustration.
And Director Computers, I understand your frustration, but to be fiduciaries of the money, you got to have the money. You have to have the money. And at the end of the day, this is the most price-worthy process right now with the balance. It's the board's decision at the end of the day. But what we're sharing with you to get where you want to get to, it's this process. If we need to add the CIN, that is as well. And that's still cheaper than what we're paying today. Or we can be status quo and keep it the same, and we're going to pay 4% more. That's essentially what we're talking about. But to get where you're wanting to go, it's literally, do you want to add the CIN now in 2022? Or do you want to wait till there's all the data in 2023? As for the data, we do not have access to that data. We have a new health insurer, and I can tell you the last health insurer we had for 3 years didn't have access to that data. I don't know what kind of access that you have to get the data, but we have not been able to get the data.
Let's talk about this.
Well, no, we're having a conversation. We're having a conversation now, Director Witherell. I mean, if we're going to have this engagement, we can't just stop it.
And I need to get down and listen to what they said, and then I'll come back and give you my thoughts on it. But I will tell you, I'm frustrated with what we're doing right now.
I understand your frustration, but I'm also frustrated that we aren't realizing that it's either this process or we pay more. And it's really that simple. But what I am asking you is the other process in addition to it. Here's the difference. You say you want to manage the data better. We have to have the data to manage. That's how we get it through the self-insured process. Now, we can do a valiant effort with the CIN now, and they're just going to be doing data real time versus data that they can go do a look back. That's the difference. And so that's the $169,000 that's on page 15 that we can add on top of this price. Otherwise, if you do it in 2023, they actually have the data to do a look back in 2023. That's the whole point. And so what I'm asking you to look at is really simple. CIN now in 2022, and we're still cheaper with the CIN now, or CIN in 2023. You still got CIN. That's what you're talking about.
Frank, I'd love to have, I wish life was as simple as those, but when you're dealing with medicine, it's not. And it is the worst, most convoluted system in the world. I'll look over this and I'll talk to them. We can have another discussion if you mind. But it doesn't come down, it may come down to just what you said, but usually there is lots of offshoots to that we're not thinking about right now. And I'll look at it.
Yeah, definitely. Please take time to look at it, but understand that we've already had how many providers that have already looked at our system up and down, John?
All of them. I think there's six different carriers.
And all were increasing what we're spending now, correct?
Correct. And Dr. Contreras, I will tell you, I really do want to sit down and go through this, because what we have here in the time and what we have the ability to actually present is nowhere near what you need to see to make you feel comfortable with what we're talking about. There are some limitations with the CIN on their network. So you're always going to have, or at least our understanding is there's going to be an overlay of a network anyway. There is going to be case management, triage, all kinds of services that are a deeper dive on the self-funded side, but it's on the self-funded is when we get access to the data. Fully insured, we are always going to be limited to the data we get access to.
I look forward to our discussion.
And I share your frustration.
Director Wright, I'm sorry, Director Hines, Vice Mayor Hines was first.
So John, explain to me why there's a difference between being self-insured and fully insured. Why? Is it federal law? Is it the insurance companies? I mean, why the difference in the data? I think that's at the root cause of what we're talking about here. Why is there a difference in the data we can access?
The fully insured carriers restrict the data that we have access to.
So they've got the data, but they won't give it to us.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay,
But in
that's
itself-
fine. That's what I'm, and I think that's goes to what Dean's saying is they've got the data, and that's why that's how they keep a leg up on the process of being able to charge us more. And like I said, they had too much profits, so they give us a refund, and they end up with the same amount of profits that they had the year before. So I get it. I get that part of it. So,
But in the self-funded world, we would have access to all of it.
so the other question I've got is, are we just trying to save $169,000? What is the detriment to adding a CIN on top of this for this year to at least start working on it? Even though they're maybe flying blind a little bit, it addresses what Director Pierce wants, which is a CIN, and we may not get to a fully integrated CIN network this next year, but what's the reason for not adding that? Is there something detrimental or gives us exposure if we don't use it? That's
I'll answer. Vice Mayor Hines, and thank you for that. And that's exactly what I shared with Director. It's really just it's really no detriment. It's either 169 now or that later.
But I guess what I'm asking is, do we get any benefit out of it? Do you guys think we get no benefit out of CIN now versus next year? There's a reason you guys have made a decision. I'm trying to get to the.
Right. Without having that 12 months of full data, it's just hard for the CIN to even show us exactly where they could manage gaps in care. And then you're going to have overlapping with the UMR, case management, and CINs. We want to be able to make sure we're going into that efficiently.
Even though if we added the CIN, they would be getting real-time data throughout the year to start looking at.
They would.
So we would be a little bit ahead. They're going to be shooting blind a little bit till they get a couple, 2-3 months worth of data in as to what our population looks like, right?
That's
Okay,
correct.
all right, thanks.
Director Wright.
I heard our presenters say that all of the providers had looked at this and weighed in and given them prices. Is the municipal league included in that? The Arkansas Municipal League?
Hi, my name is Charles Angel. We did approach the Arkansas Municipal League to see if they would give us a quote this year. They declined to quote this year. They are going through some system changes, and they indicated that they would be willing to give a quote next year, but not this year.
Okay, because their price was considerably cheaper than anything we had. What we had problems with was the network. And I think we could make some decisions as to what we would ask them to provide for us. But I just wanted to ask that question because I didn't see them on here. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. And let me see, because I can't see the board. Go ahead, Director Phillips.
Thank you. I'm not as in tune with insurance the way the mayor and Dr. Compiers is, and maybe some of our viewers are not as well. So I'm gonna ask some kind of fundamental questions to make sure I understand this going forward. So the CIN, that's the clinically integrated network, correct?
That is correct.
And what's the difference between one operated by a CIN as opposed to what is being recommended now?
So with UMR, so UMR is a subsidiary of United Healthcare. It is the self-funded administration arm of United Healthcare. So with UMR, they also have the United Healthcare Network. So you've got network providers, you have contracted pricing, you have the discounts, whatever they may be, are involved in that as to those fees for service that they offer. But they also offer claims management and a lot of the same things that the CIN does. The main difference being the CIN's network is they're very specific as getting the data and trying to treat the actual claims that they have and the conditions that they get the data. So clinically integrated network is they're actually taking the claims data as to your group and as to the participants, and trying to specifically address those issues to try to solve some of these claims that haven't yet occurred, to try to stop them, to try to maintain our claims, or at least try to mitigate any new claims that come up. So there's a lot of validity to what they're doing. The problem that we had was we don't have access to data, so they're going to be starting with the claims data in, honestly, it would be March, because it takes 90 days for claims to truly run out. So they wouldn't actually be able to get true claims data until March to really start looking at how they can impact those different employees. If, though, a person is not going to that network, then obviously they don't have that data. So you would have two tiers, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, you would have the CIN network, and then you would have the actual UMR network. So you have some doctors that are in both, but those that are actually in the CIN, they would actually have access to our claims data to try to create a better plan for our employees so that they can improve their health moving forward.
I think I follow that, and I hope our listeners do as well. And if I follow the discussion well, to get that additional CIN work, that's the 167,000 that's on page 15, correct?
That is correct.
And what you're recommending is not to use a CIN to save that 167 and then try to go fully self-funded in 23?
No, in 2023. Oh, no, self-funded in 22, I'm sorry, CIN in 23.
Okay.
Yeah,
Self-funded next year, and then go to the clinically integrated network in 23.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's it. And the thing about it is the $169,000, it's y'all's all, it's your money. You tell us what to do, but our deal is, our job was to go out and find all the options and then also try to get the price down as low as we possibly can and then bring them to y'all.
Understood. I just wanted clarity on that issue. Thank you.
Director Wright. And thank you, Vice Mayor Hines, for handling my stuff away.
If United Healthcare is our provider now, how can you say you can't get the data if they are the ones who have the data? And they are the ones who we're getting this clinically integrated network with. The data is theirs. I'm not as proficient in insurance like the Director Computers, but something doesn't sound right here. Because if I'm giving you a price for next year's insurance, I've got to base that on the data that I have for you because I am your current provider. So how can you tell us that the data isn't available?
It's not available as the carrier makes a certain amount of data available to us and to the groups when you're fully insured.
So when you
Excuse me, I'm Jenny Bradford. I'm the benefits and risk manager. And one of the ways that I have explained is that when you're talking about our fully insured plan right now, United Healthcare is basically making a bet. They're saying, hey, we think that your claims are going to be $18 million. And so that's what they're going to charge us. And they hold on to that data. They hold on to that data because they're the one footing the bill. When you go self-insured, we're taking on that risk. We're the one making that bet. We're the one saying, okay, based on what we've got here or what we've seen in the past, we think we're going to have $15 million in claims. And so this is how we're going to manage it. So when we decide to take on that risk, we then get that data. You're right, it is the city's data, but it's protected, one. But when we become the insurer of sorts, it becomes our data. So that's really different. That's why we don't have it as a fully insured plan. That makes sense?
On one hand it does, but on the other hand it doesn't. Okay, because in the era of COVID-19, what was private is not private anymore. People can walk up and ask you any questions and nobody seems to see anything wrong with that. But you got my data. It's mine, but I can't get it, is what you're telling me.
Well, what I'm saying is, what I'm saying is As the insurer, they have it, yes. But once we are the ones taking on that risk, we're the ones on the hook for actually paying the claims, that data is ours.
Well, we're on the hook for the ones paying the claims. The city of Little Rock.
Well, no, we will be when we go self-insured. We pay the premiums now for the fully insured plan. They're the ones, so we have a limited exposure in a fully insured plan. That means that no matter what, we're going to pay that premium and we won't have to pay more. But when you go to a self-insured plan, you open up your exposure quite a bit more.
That leads me to my next question, Mayor. What does this mean for our employees? Will the premiums go up, or will they go down, or will they stay the same?
Well, this is what I can tell you, talking to our employees and meeting with our wellness people. They don't like change. And let's face it, why do people come to work for the city or for a municipality? For the benefits. I mean, plain and simple. You're not getting paid as much as you would out in the public sector. You want good benefits. That's why you come to work here. So
That's what they say. I
Well,
don't
I
think
mean,
that's true anymore.
Well, exactly, because we keep dwindling those down. What we tried to do was to keep our health insurance as close to what it is now. We did not take anything at all away from them. So, it will seem seamless to them, but as time goes, but we're reinstituting the fact that they've got to have an annual wellness exam. We're doing the tobacco, you have to test that you are not a tobacco user. We've informed them that we will be utilizing these things, and that will make their premiums either go up or go down. And we've been telling people that for the past year.
I've seen some of that, and some of it I think is very intrusive. But I'm just one body, one vote on this board. Something's just not adding up to me. I'm sorry, I just got red flag going off in my head, and until I get comfortable with it, one thing I did hear that I agree with, I like the fact that you're staying with United Healthcare, because that is what we have now, and that will be the most seamless for our employees. And as you said, no, they don't like change. I don't like it either. I got United Healthcare through my retirement. So I prefer to stay with what I have. But what is that going to look like as far as my cost is concerned?
It's going down.
So the premium
Based on what they're showing us, it should go down.
So those are the numbers I want to see. And we may not be able to do it today, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this again. Is that not correct?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that just let me summarize. I believe as you get the page number where it shows it goes down.
I believe it was on 15.
Page 15, it is going.
29, page
9.
9.
So Director Wright, I think you had some very 9. Director Wright, 9.
So I will be paying what? What they will be paying what?
We didn't show the employees.
It shows the
The
aggregate.
employees will be paying the same thing that they're paying currently. The rates to the employees is not going to change. Now, if there's a wellness initiative that they do or don't do, that could impact their rates, I'm assuming, with the wellness initiative.
So it's not actually, so their rates are not going down.
Well, here's the other.
I heard she say it was, you're saying it's not.
I said it could, no, we're both saying the same thing. The rates could stay the same. They could go up or they could go down. If you decide not to do the wellness initiatives, then there is a surcharge, is my understanding, if you decide not to participate in the wellness initiatives.
But going to the plan that you have, there is no decrease.
The plan, so I think a couple of things. Let's take the health insurance and the cost to the employee, and let's take it just as it is with the health insurance. That cost is staying the same. Okay? The employee, whatever the employee is paying today, that is what we are funding for, the employee will pay next year. Now, if though there's a wellness program that they decide to participate in, their premium would go down below what they're currently paying. If they decide not to participate in it, it could go up. But that from a standpoint of what we're talking about on this health plan, we are going to fund at the same level, so the employees will pay the same thing. The only thing that could change that is if they decided to do something different on the wellness.
So in summary,
Why did it take all of this to just say that I'm sorry.
No,
I like to be succinct, because when you add a lot of words, it just
it-
confuses.
and unfortunately, Director Wright, let me choose my words wisely. Number one, this is a very thorough presentation. This is our third time, and when we had fully insured, there was a lot of conversation because the price goes up. And so now we have the price literally going down, still a lot of conversation. The reason why is because we all care about our city employees. This is a very important decision for our budget. It's a very important decision for our city employees to keep everything as simple as possible. The only change subject to, the only change for a city, the only drastic change that, only change the city employee will see on day one is the change of their UHC card that will say UMR. That's number one. Because, again, Director Computers, because you've been pushing about not only managing our data, but managing wellness. Part of, if we go back to page 15, part of our amount that takes us down to 17 million, puts us 500,000 to the good. It will also says that 500,000 to the good, it could take us from 1 million to 4 million because of three different things. There is a wellness credit of $100,000 that's built in. There's also a pharmacy rebate, a PBM pharmacy rebate, somewhere around, if we do what we're supposed to do, encouraging our employees to do that, that takes the employees, what they're currently paying, down. Now, for those employees who decide not to go get a wellness check, who decide to continue to do smoking and things of that nature, based on the data, they'll get a little bit of a surcharge. It won't be drastically different, but it won't be the same. But nominally, they're still going to pay around the same amount in their premium. It'll be a little small surcharge if they choose not to listen to our wellness coordinator that this board hired. When that wellness coordinator looks at the data and says, hey, you've been smoking for 20 years. You need to take a cessation class. You may not stop smoking tomorrow, but you need to go enroll in this class. If you choose not to, you may pay an extra $3 a month. That's what's going on. Again, Director Computers, that came from your recommendation. I want to make sure that those are the things that are employed. And so again, for our employees, if the board chooses to do this, not only is it cheaper for the city, it remains the same for the employee, and the employee is not experiencing a new physician network that they got to go look and see who's going to be my new PCP. They're not looking for anything new. It's the same network that they have today. The only difference in their card is going to, instead of saying UHC, it will say UMR. And if they are focused on wellness, like we need them to be focused on wellness, it'll be a decrease for them. That's it. And to Director Computers' credit, if we want to start managing data, even though we don't have it in total completion, we can manage data real time. We can do the CIN now for $169,000. The whole point in showing you is really figure out, because I believe that it has a couple different options on here. I don't see it. Do we want the CIN now in 2022 for 169, or do we want it in 2023 for 169? And the only difference in doing it in 2022 versus 2023 is we know for a fact they will have all the data, because it's our data now that we own. And when I say we own, that doesn't, for those viewers, that does not mean any member of the city board or city employee can go look at your data, because that doesn't what it means. But what it means is, from an analytical standpoint, we can now manage that data and do a look back in 23 for 22. But what we will be doing if we start now in 22, we will just be doing it real time. That's really all we're talking about.
Well, that part I understood. I understood the seamless integration with the network and all of that. What I did not understand is the data thing, but you've explained that. We'll see. Is this our only discussion about this? Is this it? And then until we start discussing the budget?
Yes. So again, the full
So I
intent.
better hang on to it.
Yeah. Yes. Please hang on to it. The full intent is to, as we shared, full intent is to bring resolutions to the city board on October 5th. That's still the full intent. Clearly, we will get John and David will schedule a meeting with Director Compuris between that period in time. But again, for the board members, staff has spent a lot of time, months on this process, as well as JTS. We've asked every provider in the state of Arkansas, as well as outside of the state of Arkansas, to submit a bid. This is, the most, from a fiscal stewardship standpoint, everyone else is higher, no matter what. And so the question before the city board is, what I'm hearing today is, do we want to stay fully insured and pay more? Or do we want to go to self-insured and pay less? And I would call that 2, and then there's a 2A. And the 2A is, do we want to utilize, again, one of the instructions from the Office of Executive Administration, because we listened to the board, particularly Director Compuris, is we got to do CIN. The question was, when do we do CIN? Now or later? And so what we're asking for the board consider between now and October 5th, do we want CIN now at 169, or do we want to do it later? And the only difference is that in 23, they'll have all the data to look back and analyze, versus in 22, it'll be real time. And from that standpoint, that's literally it. So that's what's before the board. The numbers are the numbers as relates to our budget. And once this passes, if it passes by the city board, then we can move down our budgetary process. And I want to remind the board, we have a lot of things before us, and this is crucial to us starting and finishing the budgeting process. And again, do we want to be fully insured and pay an additional 3.9%? I think we're paying 17.5.
It would be roughly $700,000 in annual spend.
Yeah, so we'll be increasing close to $1 million if we if we do what we're doing now and change nothing else. We'll pay an additional $1 million. If we change to self-insured, we know for a fact that we'll be paying $500,000 less than what we're paying today, with the potential, if we manage our employees and get our employees excited about doing certain things, which that's the reason why we hired a wellness person. That's why we're going to have these benefit mechanisms to do cost savings, that potential $500,000 reduction in our spend could be $3 to $4 million. And then the next question is, do we want to do CIN now? Because we want to do the CIN. Let's be clear. That's the reason why it's in the report. Do we want to pay 169 in 2022, or do we want to pay it in 2023? That's what's going before the board. And Director Compuris and I, he and I both used to be on a healthcare board together, so that's the reason why we can go back and forth. So don't take it lightly to the viewers. He and I both love insurance from that standpoint, and so don't take it lightly. But thank you, Vice Mayor Hines, for asking some of those very clarifying questions. Thank you, JTS.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Director Wright. Oh, no, Director Wright. I thought I already said thank you. I apologize. Thank you, Director Wright, for asking those questions as well. No, you weren't. You were not. I do apologize.
He didn't say anything about my questions, did Director Wright? So,
Director Antoine Phillips, thank you for your question. Director Peck, thank you you didn't ask any questions. And Director Adcock. And thank you, Director Compuris. And Director Webb, I see you over there too. I'm not going to leave you out. And Director Richardson as well. And Director Wyrick. All right. Well, I think that was, here's the good thing about this. This is why we have these type of policy discussions. We're able to ask questions that at the end of the day, it's what is the best interest for the citizens and the residents, and most importantly, as it relates to this budget expenditure, to our employees who are our most precious assets and carry on the work that we all want them to do for our residents and our customers. And so that's why we have these type of discussions, and so grateful for every member of the board and their participation. So thank you, Director Adcock. Director Compiers, Director Peck, Director Phillips. Thank you, Vice Mayor Hines, Director Wright, Director Richardson, Director Wyrick, and Director Webb. I believe, unless there's any more questions, we're ready to, and also JTS Financial, thank you so much. Stacy and Jenny, thank you so much for your hard work. We're very grateful for each of you.